She walked in with her face buried in her hands, tears running down her cheeks, and not a single person in the room even looked up. To them, she was just another girl having a bad day. No one knew what she was carrying. No one asked. But something about the way she paused at the door, just for a second, like she was collecting herself, hinted there was more to her story. At that moment, this wasn't just about heartbreak or stress. This was about someone pushed to the edge. The kind of edge that makes you either crumble or rise. And she was about to do the latter, but no one saw it coming. She didn't come from money. She didn't have connections. All she had was an idea, a quiet fire inside, and the kind of determination you only find when you've got nothing left to lose. That day, she walked into the very company that once turned her away without a second glance. They told her she didn't have the look, didn't fit the brand, and maybe try again next year. But this time, she wasn't there to ask for a job. The same people who ignored her before now couldn't take their eyes off her. The boardroom, the investors, the entire floor went silent, not from pity, but from surprise. Who was this girl with a tear-streaked face and unshakable voice? What she said next changed everything. But before we get to that moment, the one that turned an ordinary day into the beginning of a legacy, you need to understand what led her there. Because behind every quiet success is a storm no one talks about. And for her, that storm was just beginning. Just 6 months earlier, she was sitting on a worn-out couch in a tiny apartment, staring at bills she couldn't pay in dreams that felt too far to reach. Every rejection email, every unanswered call, every door slammed in her face had left another crack in her confidence. But she never stopped writing in that old notebook, the one filled with business ideas, branding sketches, and late-night thoughts she didn't dare say out loud. That notebook was her escape, her plan, and her proof that she still believed in something, even if no one else did. She wasn't born into success. Her father worked night shifts, her mother cleaned offices. From a young age, she learned to keep her head down and work twice as hard just to be seen. But no matter how invisible she felt, she kept dreaming. Not of fame or luxury, but of freedom. The kind that comes when you finally get to call the shots. When you own something real, something that matters. The company she walked into that day, the one she now stood inside crying, was the same one that had once taken her idea, polished it, and launched it without giving her credit. She had pitched it during an unpaid internship, hoping just to get noticed. Instead, they ran with it, slapped another name on it, and left her in the dust. She tried to fight it, but no lawyer would take her seriously. "It's just business," they said. "Let it go." But she didn't let it go. What no one knew was that while they were busy building their brand off her idea, she had been quietly building something bigger, smarter, and stronger. And now, standing in that same office, broken but burning inside, she was finally ready to flip the script. But how? And why now? Her decision to walk back through those doors wasn't sudden. It was building for months. Late nights, missed meals, endless research. She taught herself things no one ever offered to teach her. Branding, marketing, funding, pitching. Every word they once used to shut her out, she now used as tools to sharpen her comeback. What she lacked in degrees or titles, she made up for with grit and clarity. Still, as she stepped into that boardroom, part of her couldn't forget the betrayal. Not just the stolen idea, but the silence that followed, the way they acted like she never mattered. Inside the room sat the same executives who once dismissed her. One even called her ambitious in a naive way. They didn't recognize her at first. The tears had thrown them off, sure, but it was more than that. She wasn't dressed to impress. No designer suit, no polished pitch deck, just a woman with a plan and the nerve to carry it through. But this time, she didn't come alone. Behind her stood Maya, her quiet but brilliant co-founder, and Jordan, the lawyer who believed in her enough to work for a fraction of his usual fee. They weren't investors, they were believers, and they had proof, receipts, timelines, data, all showing how her original concept was twisted and failed without credit. But here's the twist: she wasn't there to sue them. What she wanted was bigger. Across town, something else was brewing. A rival launch, same product, different name. Hers, she had built a team, secured funding, and signed with a distribution partner that used to be loyal to the very company she was now confronting. Rumors were already floating around the industry. The timing wasn't a coincidence, but what they didn't know yet was how deep her reach now went. The silence in the boardroom stretched thin, like something waiting to snap. One of the senior executives finally leaned forward, clearing his throat, trying to regain control of the room. "So, what exactly are you here for?" he asked, voice stiff, trying to sound calm. But his eyes flickered with unease. He had recognized her now. She placed a small folder on the table, nothing flashy, just enough. Inside were timelines, dates, emails, even her original sketches. The same ones they'd brushed off as too idealistic back then. But now, they looked like the blueprint of the brand they were making millions off. For a second, no one moved. Then the legal advisor beside the CEO picked up the folder, flipping through the pages with growing tension on his face. She didn't need to explain much. The facts spoke louder than any speech could. But still, she spoke, her voice low and steady. "I'm not here to rewind the past," she said. "I'm here to control what happens next." She let those words sit in the air, knowing full well that her product was set to launch in under 48 hours. The same product, with a different name, a new message, and the original soul they had stripped from it. And the best part? Industry buzz had already started. Influencers were posting teasers, early reviews were glowing, and 3 major retailers had quietly signed distribution deals, one of which had previously dropped that line due to creative concerns. None of it was coincidence. Back at her office, her team was counting down. Social media ads were queued, press kits were ready, and a bold campaign headline was already trending: built by her, stolen by them, reclaimed by all. But here's the thing no one in that room expected: she hadn't shown them everything yet. Just as the tension peaked and eyes shifted nervously around the boardroom, she reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. She didn't say a word as she slid it across the table. The CEO hesitated, but eventually opened it. And that's when the second twist hit. Inside were internal documents, emails, confidential reports, all of them showing how the company had not only taken her idea, but how they'd knowingly buried her name. There were threads between top executives discussing how no one would ever trace it back to her. One message read, "It's clean. She has no platform, no resources. We move forward." The air in the room shifted fast. Panic started creeping into their eyes. Then she dropped the final card: recordings. Quiet, legal, but damning. Conversations she'd captured during her internship, meetings where her pitches were praised in private, only to be shut down later in public. The very people now staring at her were caught on tape admitting they were planning to repurpose her concept. Still, she wasn't finished. "I gave you a chance to do the right thing," she said, calm but sharper now. "Months ago, I reached out. I asked for a conversation. You ignored me. You bet I'd stay silent." The CEO stood up, trying to salvage control, but before he could speak, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, then turned the screen for the room to see. Live. Her team had just launched the first live stream of their product drop. Viewers were already pouring in. The brand hashtag was trending. Influencers, celebrities, everyday women, they were showing support. People were angry. People were listening. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse, she looked back up and said, "Oh, and there's one more thing, but I'll let my partner explain that." The door opened. The door swung open, and in walked someone no one in that room ever expected to see: Daniel Brooks, former VP of product at their own company. The room froze. Just a year ago, Daniel had left without much explanation. Whispers said it was burnout. But now, standing beside her, it was clear there was more to the story. He looked each of his former colleagues in the eye before speaking. "I saw what you did to her. I saw the way you dismissed her, then built an empire off her idea. I tried to speak up. You shut me out." He turned to her and gave a small nod. "I didn't quit because I was tired. I quit because I was done helping people get rich off someone else's brilliance." In his hand, he held a flash drive, one filled with time-stamped meetings, internal roadmaps, and early development files that showed the product's DNA matched hers exactly. And more importantly, it showed they'd known it all along. With Daniel's evidence, the story wasn't just emotional, it was legally airtight. Silence collapsed over the room. Some execs stood up, trying to save face. Others looked down, already knowing it was over. The weight of exposure had landed. The brand's reputation was already spiraling online, and the press had caught wind of the live stream. Her story was spreading, not just as a business battle, but as a symbol of stolen ideas, resilience, and justice in the startup world. She walked toward the exit, Maya and Daniel at her side. But before leaving, she paused, turned back, and said, "You built your brand off my voice. Now I own the mic." But just as she reached the door, her phone buzzed again. Another offer, not from a brand, but from a major investor. And the number? It had more zeros than she'd ever seen. She stepped outside into the sunlight, the city buzzing around her, unaware it had just witnessed the final chapter of a long, quiet war. The offer on her phone was from a global investor, one she had admired for years. They weren't just throwing money at her. They believed in the vision, the values, and the fire that had brought her this far. And this time, she was in control. Full ownership, full creative rights. No more being in the background of her own story. Back at her office, her team was gathered around screens, watching the numbers rise. Sales were pouring in. Comments from women across the world flooded the feed. Messages of support, of shared frustration, of inspiration. They weren't just buying a product. They were buying into a story of resilience, ownership, and truth. Her truth. Maya was already on a call lining up press interviews. Daniel started outlining a public statement, one that wouldn't attack but clarify. They weren't here to destroy anyone. They were here to build something better. Transparent, honest, human. As for the old company, they went quiet. Legal advisors scrambled, PR teams spun vague responses, and executives began to distance themselves. But the damage was done. The real story had reached the people, and it was louder than any ad campaign. She sat down at her desk, that same old notebook still within reach. Flipping through the pages, she saw the original sketches, the ones they said would never work. She smiled, not out of pride, but peace. She had walked in crying. She had walked out owning the place. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she stopped waiting for one. And now she wasn't just a founder. She was a force. And this was only the beginning.